Hello, I'm Dr. Rosie Kuhn, but you probably already knew that. I'm back home. The last couple of sessions I've had with you, I've been over at the Frankie's house for various reasons. So today I'm home again in my own little abode and my little studio with you. This month is we're in December of 2021, and we're getting close to Christmas. We're in still in the pandemic and all kinds of elements of that are still influencing our lives, and and life is what it is. And this month, December, I'm talking about living alone. Last week, I talked about what what made it part of the choice or no choice that you were living in a sense. Do we choose to be alone, or do we choose to live alone? Do we choose to live alone as a transition to relationships or from relationships? Is it just a matter of circumstances? A lot of the pandemic has caused people to have to live alone or isolate themselves, um, or a spouse perhaps or partner died or children died, or something happened where you are now living alone. The circumstances were such that that was the case. So lots of different things, and there's that sense of but possibility that you just like, I'd rather live alone. I'm good at living alone, and I'm kind of most of those. I do much better, I think, living alone. I have yet to find a partner. I have yet to, let me frame that in a way that's better. I have yet to engage in a relationship, in a partnership, in such a way that it was actually enhanced my life. Most partnerships, and the way that I've been in partnerships, have not enhanced my life. So living alone actually works for me in a really, so far, in a really good way. It works well for me because a lot of my activities, like writing or painting, uh, require more solitude. I've done a lot of, been doing a lot of spiritual work and spiritual immersion work. You've probably seen my podcast perhaps on spiritual immersion, where I needed a lot of solitude in order to go through this process. When family is around and or partners, or it can get very distracting. So I needed a lot of alone time. My partner here, Gracie, she's the best. She needs some time and attention, but generally speaking, she's pretty patient with me. So I needed a lot of alone time. I'm not sure how much alone time I still need, uh, but but my life required that kind of solitude. So each of us has our own needs for aloneness, even when we're in relationships. Men have their men caves, and women now have their she caves, and places where we can be alone by ourselves, because we each need some degree of solitude. And that's all a very, very personal experience. So, like I said last week, I talked about, choose, is it a choice or no choice? People who leave their relationships, um, they sometimes have to go and live by themselves for a while, or that might mean with a roommate. But there's a separation and a transition time. So whatever it is that we're choosing, perhaps to live alone, there's some stuff to deal with. When I first lived alone, I was 26 or 27. I left my marriage, and it was the first time that I was really alone, and it was terrifying because um, because of all the fears, all the things that I made it mean, and that's what we're talking about today. Is what do we make it mean to live alone? There's so much meaning in living alone. And one of the things I do want to mention too is a lot of what we're talking about, and what I want to talk about in these in my lives, has to do with self transformation, self growth, self evolving, self awareness. And the more that we can become self aware, the more we become more empowered. And the more we become empowered, the more we have a life that's fulfilling and fulfilling to our human spirit. So all of this is related to that. And if you're interested, I created a boot camp called Inward Bound Boot Camp for Self Transformation, and the link is below. It's a YouTube YouTube event. It's 20 videos and it's free. So, and each video is about 10 minutes, 15 minutes. So that's available to you as a support for you if you're interested in self transformation. And all of that I'm talking about is all about self transformation. So today I'm talking about what's the meaning we make living alone. What do we make it mean? So often, and especially when I was younger, and I'd grown up with 8 brothers and sisters, and sometimes we had aunts and uncles or grandmas and living with us, so it was always a lot of people around. And then when I got married, I was very engaged in the marriage partnership, so I was very distracted by that. So when I moved out of my marriage and, moved into an apartment, that was the very first time that I'd ever actually lived alone, and I was terrified. I was so afraid of loneliness, and I was afraid that it meant that I would never find a partner. I was afraid. I was afraid, and what I made it mean to live alone made it even more difficult. And this is true for anything. Quite often, and what makes anything difficult or challenging, generally speaking, is the interpretations we make about it, the thoughts that we have about it, um, and and that is what it's like. If I have in my preferences, I mean, I have a preference. I have a preference for living alone, and I still have a desire to have a partnership. And how that works, I don't know. But that's part of learning who you are and what your preferences are, and what's the truth of how you be you. And this is where this particular week of discussion, I think, is really, really important in that um, we make it mean, we make living alone mean something when it can actually be an opportunity to investigate and figure out who you are. So that if, for instance, um, living alone, a lot of people are afraid of living alone because they don't want to experience loneliness. And so, what living alone means to a lot of people is I'm going to be lonely. And that isn't necessarily true, but I think learning about loneliness, learning about being alone is a really important part of this process. And in a sense, for example, when the pandemic came, now you can see outside my window. There's a lot of woods behind me, and my whole yard is woods. I can basically I live in the woods. I live in solitude. And I also have friends and connections with people outside these woods. Uh, but when the pandemics came and then we were told to isolate, it wasn't difficult for me. It was normal. And I was doing some good Google research, and that's true for a lot of people who live alone, is they already know how to do it. They already have a sense of how to take care of themselves in a way that um, moves them beyond the original fears and the original adjustments of living alone. And another thing that we think of when we think of living alone is that we're going to be isolated. And that's just not true. There's so many ways that I connect with people, even though I may not leave my house all day. I do my coaching sessions and my training sessions on Zoom, so I'm constantly seeing people. My daughter lives in Edmonton, and I talk to her, video with her quite a bit, and other friends. So there's a lot of connection that I have with people. But the original thought is I have no, I'm going to be alone and isolated, and it can be a transition. Like I said, the first while of living alone, it was a huge transition, partly because I moved to a different city. I didn't know anybody. I knew one person in that place, so I was starting from scratch. But that aloneness was a really, really important part of the journey for me to learn to be alone without being lonely. Now, a big part of this topic today, I think, is this quality of being, which is loneliness. And in the research that I did on Google, it talked about the fact that quite often, there's now 28% of at least the United States population that live alone. That's 30 some million people. So a lot of people living alone. Uh, and that this sense of loneliness can be, and the fear of loneliness can be something to adjust to. It's considered what living alone. They say increases one's chances or one's experience of common mental disorders, mental problems. And what that means is, and most of that is related to loneliness. So what's really important to talk about is what is loneliness and what does that mean? What is it? And when I say that, what does that mean? We all go, oh, yeah, I know what it means to be lonely. But what's the quality of the experience of loneliness? And why does that cause us such distress and anxiety and depression? What is it about loneliness that sucks? There's a where earlier, I mean, wherever I was in relationship, whether in my family life or in my marriages, and my partnerships, there was an aspect of the relationships where, I mean, I felt lonely in these relationships, people all around, and I'm feeling this loneliness. And it was worse being with people. I've had more experiences or worse experiences of the feeling and the sense and the quality of loneliness being with people, partners, marriages, children, than actually living alone. So loneliness can be experienced in when you're living with people or living on your own. It's not just when you're isolated, in a physical space. So I think that's really important to know. Um, and what are the experiences of loneliness? What did I write down here? Um, Anxious. Um, it's we feel anxious, we feel sad because maybe we're missing people or we feel a loss, and that's important. Hi, Marge. I'm glad you're here. Um, that's important to feel the loss. It's important to feel what we're feeling, what we think we in our normal consensus reality, the way that our conscious or the way we're kind of taught to think is um, loneliness is a bad thing, and aloneness is a bad thing. And if you're feeling sad, that's a bad thing. And if you're just feeling loss, if you're feeling what people call depression, that's a bad thing. Depression, quite often for me, is a culmination of sad, mad, and bad. And when we can distinguish and say, what is it that you're actually experiencing, what you call depression? What is that? Most of the time, people will say, well, I feel sad, I feel disappointment, I feel alone, I feel angry at the world, I feel angry at my whoever. And they can distinguish and pull out all of these threads of emotions and feelings about life, and that's a good thing. That's what our emotions do. They let us know when connections are important to us, and when we've lost a connection or lost something, it's important for us to feel that loss, as opposed to going, no, I'm not going to feel that, I'm just going to put it away. So quite often when we're transitioning and perhaps learning to live alone, part of that is learning to live with and experience and respect and honor those parts of ourselves which we don't give much credence to, much validity to, and say, "Yeah, I'm feeling sad tonight. Feeling mad at the world because I'm here in this situation and I'm all by myself, and that's frustrating, and I hate it." Those are all really good things. it doesn't mean you're going to act upon it. It's that you allow the emotions and the feelings to be there. If you were listening last week to the live, I was talking about, and I've been talking about it for a couple of weeks actually, that my situations. I mean, I've been living alone a long time, but there's parts of my life that I've things that I've been living with. And the other day, a couple weeks ago, we had a major storm, and I went, man, I'm getting tired of being responsible for all of this stuff that I have to take care of on my own. And that's another thing that I'll get back to what I was talking about in a minute, but responsibility is a huge element of living alone. Now, some people say, "Oh, you live alone, so you don't have, you have less to take care of or less people to worry about or all of those things." But in some ways, living alone means there's more responsibility because I'm the only one here to take care of my financial needs or my health needs or my eating needs or my cleaning needs. There's nobody here to help me cut the lawn or whatever. It's all up to me. That's a lot of responsibility. So a few days ago, weeks ago, when we had this major storm, I went, "Oh my God, I'm getting tired of being so responsible for things." And with that came my hot water heater broke, and the power went out, which was related to a thing in the trailer, but not something else. And it turned me into a panic. I went into this panic attack or trauma, like a PTSD, a post-traumatic stress reaction. And it had nothing to do with these little things in life, but it triggered something deep within me. And it was related to, loss from a long time ago that had nothing to do with now, but now triggered that response. And I couldn't ignore it. I needed to fix what needed to get fixed, and those things all got fixed. Uh, but what triggered or got ignited was something that I needed to attend to within myself. And so by attending to those things, it ended up I did quite a bit of crying and grieving, uh, and letting go of stuff that I don't even understand. But the emotion was there, and when I gave myself the attention and the time to be with that, those emotions express themselves, and then the panic and the whatever PTSD, it diminished, and it continues to diminish, and that's really important. So when we're living alone, we don't have the distractions of relationships. We have distractions of TV or social media or our dogs or aquariums or whatever it is that are engaging for you. But there's more opportunities to be present to who you are, who I am, in this process of being human. Now, part of my engaging with you in these lives is that I really believe, and it's my experience that we are spiritual beings having this human experience, and that we're here to learn, we're here to grow, we're here to expand ourselves, we're here to evolve. And as people would say, to become enlightened in a sense, to awaken to who we are in our essential nature, in our fullest expression of self. And our fullest expression of self isn't just our creative, inspired, innocent, playful, blissful love. It's also the anguish of life, the betrayal, the abandonment, the invisibility, the feelings of inadequacy, the feelings of failure. Those are all part of this expression of self. And we think that, if we are a spiritual being, that we're divine, and that what is divine again is happy and peace and joy and love. But what is also divine is the anguish and the anxiety and the sadness and the despair. That is also so much a part of the divine expression through you. And so whether we're living alone or with other people, whatever that is, but we're talking specifically about living alone, we have an experience, we have an opportunity to experience ourselves to the fullest ability. Now, when we're in partnerships, when we have children, when we're in our careers, we create engaged connection with those, and in that, we build. We're learning as well. We're learning to engage and connect and be in a way that's fulfilling to yourself and to others. Uh, Everybody I have ever talked to about vision statements and what they want to do in the world and their purpose. Everyone I've ever talked to, it's really about serving and contributing to the world in a good way. There are people that say, "Yeah, I want a bigger boat, or I want a bigger car, or I want more money." But when we talk about their vision or their life purpose, they come back to, "I want to serve the world." And I find that really fascinating, but true. So when we're living alone or when we're living with other people, we have an opportunity to really look at how we're serving the world the way that we're serving. I've talked in many of my talks about how I thought that I was loving and kind, but really what I was pretty selfish and narcissistic. So living alone, that can either help me stay in selfish narcissistic, or it can give me an opportunity to learn and grow and see who I am in this being. Gracie, she has been a big teacher for me in that she has needs and she has wants and desires, and she's very playful and wonderful, and so my commitment to with her in a way that fulfills us both. And that's a big thing, is to learn what's fulfilling for me and what's my commitment to her. And that balance is really what relationship is about. I'm learning more from my dog than I could with a human being because I had too many interpretations in the way. And I also have three different fish aquariums in my little place. They're small, but learning to be in relationship with who I am and what brings joy to my heart, what brings pleasure, what brings uh, playfulness. And so these little fish tanks, there's one right there. The lights aren't on right now, but these little fish bring me so much joy, and I don't have to do much. Feed them, and the water's clean, so I keep those all things. But I get to look at them, and they just bring me joy, and that's such a pleasure to have in my own home. And I've got some ponds outside with some fish. But those are things that I've learned over time that bring me joy. Now, a relationship. So this is kind of a stream of consciousness experience today. Um, Somebody else has joined us, and if you would like to say hi in the chat, that would be great. Thank you. Um, um, mm, when I was with my most recent partner, um, we were together for about 12 years, I think. Yeah, about 12 years. And we lived separately. He's down in California and I'm up here. And it was valuable in our relationship, especially for me, to have that distance. Hi, David. I'm glad you're here. Um, it was important for me to have that, and it gave me that opportunity to know what my choices are. I was able to know what was important to me, and what did partnership mean, and what was partnership anyway. It's another one of those things we put interpretations on. Um, living alone, I become more aware of my partnership with Gracie or my fish or my property. Where are those connections, and those connections with people or other things? My space, my relationship with space is really, really important to me. My relationship with the world that I live in and on this island and my place on the island, that's really important to me. And I think my living alone has given me the opportunity to articulate that and get to know who that is. Um, I When I travel, I generally travel alone, and I like that because it gives me the opportunity to meet new people. If I'm traveling with my partner, I'm more likely to stay engaged with that person versus really getting to know who learning, new people, that kind of thing. So it's kind of an interesting process to see what's possible in living alone versus here's what it means to live alone. You're going to be lonely. You're going to be um, sad, and depressed, and disengaged from the world. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean that at all. And again, this the intention of me talking about us living alone in this month is really about supporting and empowering you to question how you think about yourself, how you think about your situation, whether you're living alone or living with family or partners, is to think about who you are in this process and who you how you want to be in your life. So, in a sense, um, if if you have a tendency towards um, feeling bad or sad or mad, then you have an opportunity to start to look at that rather than saying, well, no, it's just my way of being. I'm generally a grumpy person. It's like, that's kind of a choice to be a grumpy person in a sense that whatever it is that's underlying what's creating the grumpiness, what's the source of the grumpiness, if you will? That's my one of my favorite questions. Um, in um, in the book Alcoholics Anonymous, Bill W. says that the cause of alcoholism, which is the cause of all addictions, we'll say the cause of all addictions is restless, irritable discontent. So when we this is another thing of a lot of people who live alone will start to use substances to deal with their irritability, or they'll use a lot of people use social media or movies or pornography or other things. So there's when we get restless and irritable and discontent, we start to go, okay, I'm anxious now and I don't like that feeling. And so what do I do? Okay, I'm going to go get myself some cookies. That's what I'm going to do, or ice cream, or I'm going to get a beer, or I'm going to go get some drugs, or whatever it is that we believe will start to stabilize and become calm. Then we rely on those substances, or maybe we start tapping our hands together or biting our fingernails, and that becomes our our release from restless, irritable discontent. Um, it can be habits, it can be masturbation, it can be knitting, painting, it can be all kinds of things that we do. And what makes something an abuse, if you will, is what it does to the quality of our being. Why am I bringing that up? The restless, irritable discontent. So, when we ask, what's the source of the restless, irritable discontent? That's a big question. It's like, well, I broke up with my partner 3 months ago, or something happened a long time ago, or the pandemic. But there's something that's the source of our restless, irritable discontent. There's a source to our grieving and our loss or our sadness or our anger. There's something that is there that was the catalyst for having this be here. And when we live alone, we're a choice as much as we are if we were living with somebody and saying, hey, I need some therapy, or I need some coaching about this, or I need to really be present to myself in a way that's honoring the fact that I have this restlessness. I'm not in serenity. I'm not happy about this situation. And we can get support and help for that. That's a really important thing. Um, so part of learning to live alone is learning to not only manage. So a lot of our lives we're managing our emotions versus what I'm all about, which is the ability to do a paradigm shift and reframe things so that we work through and grow from our experiences versus finding only and being aware of only the adversity of the situation. Any thoughts, David? Any thoughts, Marge? In a sense, coming back to loneliness, most of us are afraid to feel lonely And what is it that causes that? Why are we afraid? Because we know what it feels like to be lonely. And somewhere in our life or lifetimes, we've experienced loneliness, and it feels really bad. And and we believe that living alone means I'm going to feel alone. I'm going to feel loneliness. And we feel like that's a static thing. Like loneliness is a static thing. If I'm lonely, I'm going to be lonely, as opposed to what I talked about, which is I transitioned through that process of experiencing loneliness to something else. I had to learn, wow, I have nobody, I have nothing other than this space, and I am not happy. I'm scared because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to do me. I didn't know how to do me alone because I didn't know myself. I didn't, I was studying. I was going to study to be a therapist. Go figure. But I didn't have any um, activities or things that I enjoyed that filled my time. So I was very isolated in that point. But I had to learn and grow so that I could move and transition through the loneliness. So the loneliness became something that I experience every once in a while. Rarely do I feel the loneliness. And so I'm not afraid of it. And because I'm not afraid of it, then I'm not making choices based on that fear. Um, I'm uncomfortable. Like I said, I rarely feel loneliness. When I did, I was more likely to get into relationships with people that weren't good for me. So I don't make choices from loneliness. Doesn't work, generally speaking. David says, in living alone, something we decide or something or we drift into being. And that's what we talked about last week, David, when you were here, is it something that and or maybe it's a different question in a sense. Quite often people who are married or in partnership, they're so engaged at first in the honeymoon and the love or the whatever, and the same even with children. We're so engaged with them, but at some point, quite often people drift. And now the men are in their man cave and the women are over in the kitchen or in their studio or someplace else. And that drifting apart, I think that's probably what you're talking about, is that we quite often will drift off into those different places of aloneness. And for some people, that's comfortable. We're married for 60 years or 30 years or whatever, and he likes to do that, and I like to do this. But, we're happy enough that we're going to stay together. And it's like, okay, excellent. Whatever works for you. And if it's enough, it's enough. My tendency is, and I have been in relationships where I was irritable from the beginning, but I didn't pay attention to it. I didn't pay attention to what my irritability was about. I just thought it was, well, he's not home and I'm upset and I'm pissed off because he's not home and he should be home and he said he'd be home. So that's why I'm upset, as opposed to looking at the quality of my relationship with myself and the quality of relationship with my partner. That's what I needed to do, but I didn't do that. I didn't have enough awareness to to say, "Geez, I'm not happy." And what's that about? Is it just that I'm an unhappy person or that I'm a bitch? I'm just a bitch. That's all there is. It's like, no. Nobody wants to be a bitch. They be a bitch because it's powerful and controlling and all kinds of stuff. But when you ask people, "Do you wanna be a bitch?" They say, "No, I don't wanna be a bitch. I wanna be kind and loving and generous. I wanna know what my life purpose is. I wanna do that." Okay. So so I liked what you said, what you brought in, David, in a sense that quite often in marriages or partnerships or again with children, children will begin to drift off quite often into their rooms or with their friends or someplace else where there's a disconnection, but what used to be maybe a very strong connection. Um, in part of what I was reading today about, people who really enjoy their singlehood, enjoy being single and living alone. Um, quite often people will find that curious. Like, don't you want a partnership? Don't you want a relationship? Is there something wrong with you? And in that process, it's like there's nothing wrong with me. I just have a preference. This is what's working for me right now, and that's a really good thing to think about. Is like, here's what's working for me right now. Is this what's going to be for the rest of my life? I have no idea. I have no idea what's gonna happen. And if there's a partner out there in a way that is gonna work for me and gonna work for that person, that's gonna be great. I'm excited about that possibility. But when people ask questions about like that, it's like it's just fascinating what it brings up for everybody. David says, when my son died and my long marriage fell apart, I drifted away from people and came to myself. I'm happy with solitude, but old age and illness leaves me by myself. And there's a difference then there isn't there between the solitude and the isolation. And it sounds like, David, that's an of edge for you, of that place where you're happy with your solitude, um, but there's that place where you kind of lean into that isolation, which draws you to the into that place of loneliness. Is that true? Is that accurate? And I would suspect that's a hard balancing act when because you have less, it sounds like, so you can just thumbs up or whatever. It sounds like you've got less opportunities to choose, less freedom to choose, um, when you want to participate or engage with people and when you don't. Is that accurate? We like to be at choice about when we're with people and when we're not with people. We like to be at choice about that. And quite often, when choosing to live alone, we don't have that. So it's when we're moving away from family, we'll say, and where you used to see your mom every day, or your partner or whatever, used to see people every day, and when you live alone, you don't see them every day. You might see them once a week, and it's a learning process. But there's a choice in that. But there's also the place where we become not at choice about that, and that, I would say, is really a difficult part of living alone, is being able to distinguish that choice. When do you have choice and when you not have choice? Is that a thumbs up for you, David? You might be writing. For a long time. And we all of us are, I mentioned earlier that we have there's these common mental disorders, um, issues. I'm sorry. David says, I've always been capable with independence and not used to seeking help. I have no family close at hand. Yeah, yeah. My daughter lives in Edmonton, which is about 1,000 miles away, and my son lives in Las Vegas, and we haven't talked for a long, long time. Um, and I used to make up a lot of futurizing, which I call it futurizing, which is I would, in my mind, imagine when the children were going to come visit, and I would have this very wonderful yurt, and it was full of all family stuff and games to play and stuffed animals for the grandson and all of those things. And I filled a lot of myself up with futurizing. And I think we do this quite often with, oh, when I get married again, or when I get a partner again, or when I, um, you know, do something else where I'm going to be connected with people, and we futurize, and it's a way that it keeps us entertained and keeps us fulfilled. And I did that for a long time, and I realized it was not accurate. In a sense, I was filling my life with this imagination, and I wasn't living my life. I was living in my imagination of what was going to be, but not living my life. And that's another, and the same with, I think we do this a lot, where we hope and we wish, whether we're in partnership or not, but we wish our partners would be different. We wish our children would be different. We wish that with Christmas coming, that they would all come and we would have this beautiful, wonderful Christmas. We have a lot of wishing that we do, and we live into the hope that. And quite often we become addicted to the hoping. It's just a way of dealing with restless, irritable discontent. It's just another way to deal with what isn't working. Is we just hope it works. I hope it works. I hope it would work. I'm hoping that that will change. I'm hoping he will change. I'm hoping my health will change. I'm hoping, and that hoping becomes addictive, but not empowering. It just keeps us, again, it's like taking a drug or a shot of whiskey or something. It just kind of calms the system, as opposed to saying, this isn't changing. And so I got to do something about it. It's like, yeah, no, I'll just keep hoping it changes. So when we live in hope of the next partner, we live in the next hope of what could be more empowering. It sometimes gets in the way of living our life. And then it becomes a question like, oh my God, like how do you live life? How do you do you? How do I do me? And it's been a very challenging. I don't think any journey, any particular path is free of challenges. So this one that I happen to be on, whether it's with partnerships sometimes and no none at other times, it's been very challenging to know how to do me. And when I'm that would mean that I'm choosing not based on fear, and I'm not choosing based on what other people are telling me I should do, not choosing on fear of money, no money. Uh, so I'm looking at all of these ways that, okay, and so the bottom line is I'm learning to choose from something other than fear, and becoming more conscious of where that fear infiltrates something, justifications, rationalizations, imaginations, daydreaming. It's like, oop, there's one. Oop, there's one. And seeing where fear plays itself out. And the more that I am aware of what those things are that are fear based, I become more clear of choosing based on what my choice is, what's true in my heart's desire, my what feels inspiring or intuitive, a calling. And that's challenging because even though so much of our self-help dogma is telling us that, at the same time it's saying, no, do it this way, do it this way, don't be be afraid. Don't be afraid, but be afraid that you're not afraid. And so those kinds of dynamics play a big part in the challenge of actually learning to be you. And so it's challenging, yeah. Marge says, my husband drank heavily for a long time and I lived in that hoping place. He eventually quit. But if I'd taken actions, perhaps it wouldn't have been so long. Excellent. Yeah. Um, I think it's part of a relationship dynamic for so many people that they live in hope that the partner would change, um, or praying is a very good thing sometimes, and other times it's a way of, again, continuing a pattern that's not healthy or creates well-being or creates peace. So those are big challenges. Let me see what else I've got here. So I think the bottom line for me is that um, living alone is a path, and it's a path that's, like David says, sometimes it gets chosen and sometimes it's something you drift into if you're living with somebody but living in different parts of the house. Aloneness or living alone can be a choice based on, I'm just really want to get to know myself, and living alone is a good way to do that. Or someone might say, I want to get to know myself and I want to do that through partnership. It's like, okay, great. It's all good. It's all a learning opportunity. It's all part of growing ourselves and expanding our abilities and capacities. And the point is the dilemma is it's going to bring you up to allow you to confront those things in life which you need to confront within yourself, those fears or the ways that you're avoiding or denying or distracting yourself from truly honoring and respecting and finding the preciousness here in you. And that can be more challenging. And David, you're bringing up that as you're aging and there's some illness here that you're dealing with, it's more difficult. I'm saying that, but what do I know? I mean, I'm aging, but but how do you come to appreciate and value and continue to grow that sense of preciousness as your illness may be progressing and as you're aging? It's like it's challenging. Um, but it's part of everybody's life. It is part of everybody's life. And we want to avoid it and ignore it. And part of what I want to do through these um, lives and the other work that I'm doing is to say, hey, you're here. You chose to be here on this planet as as a learning opportunity, as a growing opportunity. And you came here with a specific curriculum in mind. It's like going to deciding to go to college and you're deciding you're going to be an engineer. There's a certain curriculum that you've come here to work through in order to become more of you. Um, I was talking to a client this morning, and she's studied to be a social worker and did some therapy work with people and learning mindfulness training, teaching, those kinds of things. And when we talk about stuff like she's she's going through a separation, and here's Christmas and it's sadness and all that, and I go, you got to kind of be with this. And she goes, but I've been being with it for 5 years, and it's it's like I totally get it. She's I should be beyond this. And I said, it's like being in high school and learning biology and learning cell development, but you're not in high school anymore. You're in college and you're in your sophomore year and you're taking um, this class in cellular microbiology or something where the intensity of the learning is increased. So what you learned in the past is helping you to be ready for and to work through what you need to learn at this level. So when we get like, okay, I'm feeling lonely, I can go take a drink, I can call a friend, I can go knit, I can go paint. There's so many things I can do, but which one of those things is going to really grow me? And sometimes, like I was saying, I was on the couch yesterday afternoon in the midst of a grief process. It's like I know how to do this stuff. I've been doing it. I should be done with it, right? It's like, yeah, no, this is the next level. This is another level. We're continually up leveling and growing our capacities to know ourselves in the fullness of that expression. Again, versus whether it's the expression of isolation, the expression of despair, the expression of abandonment, the expression of deep loss. We don't know until we're there to go, oh, yeah, no, I haven't gone that far with myself. I keep avoiding it. I keep distracting myself. And it's like, yeah, as long as we're avoiding and distracting, we don't get to actually come into full um, partnership with ourselves. We kind of here's our the part of us that's scared and panicky, and I'm off over here taking care of other people or distracted by something. But when I say, okay, I need to attend to myself here because she's lonely, then I start something else. I start to grow myself and my capacities to know myself in all different ways. Hi, Fred. Thanks for being here. Hey, if you're watching this video now or later and it's of value to you, please give it a thumbs up. And if you live alone and you have certain issues that come up for you, things that in ways that you've thought about living alone that has caused more frustration and discomfort, I'd love to hear about that from you because so many people are living alone. Like I said, like 32 million people in the United States live alone. And we can be lonely in that process, or we can kind of go, oh, yeah, yeah, I know that feeling. I know what that's like. And we can start to make a difference for ourselves in that, in seeing at sometimes we might feel lonely, but here's what we can do or how we can be in a way that will transition that loneliness perhaps to something more positive. Thank you for the thumbs up. That's great. Um, so next week we're going to talk about um, friends, families, and what's the title here? Hang on a second. Friends, family, mm-mm-mm. Friends, family, and other companions. So how do we live alone, and how do we be in relationship to other people at the same time? What's that balance? And what's that like? So that's a big part of this. So thanks for being here today. Unless there's other questions or thoughts that you guys have. Um, and you know what, David, I'm as I'm looking at your chat, I'm realizing that when you mentioned that your son died and your marriage fell apart, um, th- th- the the degree of loss and the degree of loneliness I can imagine was just tremendous for you. And um, and uh, that is in a sense a forced living alone. That is a really very difficult journey. And so I just thank you for sharing that part with us because I think it happens for people in a way that it just is not it's not anything but anguish and tragedy and um, insurmountable loss, I can imagine. So thank you for sharing that with us today. I really appreciate it. And I think that it touches other people who may be in the same situation that you've grown yourself through. And you've been um, with me and these lives for almost a year, David, and I really appreciate your presence. The same with you, Marge and Fred. Thank you so much. And that connection means a lot to me that you come visit with me every Thursday or most Thursdays anyway. So thank you for that. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it, unless you guys have something else. Again, if you are new to this channel, please feel free to subscribe. I do have a inward bound boot camp for self transformation that is free, and you can find that in the description below the links, as well as other playlists that I have on all kinds of things: transformational coaching, deep recovery. And so many other things that might be of interest to you. So, again, thanks for being here. I'll talk to you next week. Bye for now.